Hey everyone, I'm Gloria Masters and this is the show, Handing the Shame Back. Each week I provide another session with a fellow CSA survivor and we talk about history and we also talk about opportunity and resources out there and ways that we can all learn from each other's stories and support each other. We do have a cautionary note on this show. If you feel triggered at any point, please stop watching, go to the show notes below where you will be directed for help. At the end of the show, we will close off again with some more recommendations for you. So in the meantime, it's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome Denise Mercer all the way from Michigan to the show today. And she will be allowed to speak once I've finished. So I have a few things to inform you about regarding her. She wrote a book called My Father's Table, which is on Amazon in 2013. She also co-founded Coffee and Cocoa, which is a cause she's dedicated a lot of her time and energy to support fellow survivors of child sexual abuse and other forms of abuse out there. And that was established in 2020, late 2020. She has also earlier this year, because this woman's a powerhouse, she just doesn't stop giving and providing for CSA survivors across the world, phenomenal. She also established in January this year, Together We Can Clubhouse. And this is a forum for people to come together, learn from each other. And I will let Denise tell us more about that once she gets to speak, which is about now. Hi, Denise.
Well, hello, Miss Gloria. Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure to get to spend time with you and, just share stories and that connection that I always look forward to with fellow CSA survivors.
Thank you so much. And man, you've been doing some great work over in the States, and you must have a lot to share. So I guess being a CSA survivor yourself, and as our audience is mainly that and dedicated to them actually, what's kind of led you to this? Are you comfortable to share any of your experience as a CSA survivor?
Sure. And, for me, I grew up in a small town. Um, and I'm very proud of my small town. And I love my small town, but I left my small town when I was 19. And I didn't realize for probably 25 years that I was actually running away. And it was funny, I would come back to visit and I would always check in my old neighborhood on this little, where I used to live. And until my memories came back at 38. And I was always checking on that little girl that the neighbor molested when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. Across the street, they lived. And it was just so amazing to me too. So my memories came back and I was able to deal with it when I was 38. And I've just learned, I wrote My Father's Table in 2013. This was about 2014 when this happened and the memories came back. And I had learned from sitting around those tables, to have lunch with my dad and the fellow recovering alcoholics and stuff. I had learned so much about living life and facing fears that when my memories came back, I knew that I had to face this. Like I knew it was, and I would tell people, I feel like all my life I have been going up against a concrete wall with a toothpick. And when this memory came back, it was like I felt like God just moved me over in front of a door and said, "Here's the door. Now you just have to walk through it." And because I would get so far and then I would just be beating my head or trying to get through with a toothpick. So for me, it was like an opportunity to finally understand. And it wasn't easy, as most CSA survivors know. Walking through that
Yes.
door is very painful.
Yeah.
Um, and you experience a lot, but I had that finally had that opportunity to deal with it and I hear so many survivors talk about that, like the memories coming back and just different things. So it's just something that I finally had the opportunity to deal with. And It was ugly, it was brutal, but you make it to the other side, don't we?
Yeah, and I guess what a question from me around that is when you talk about you finally could understand, what was it you were finally understanding? Are you able to share with our audience a bit more about?
I think it was more like there was everyone around me, like my dad, or I had people comment, like I would always, it was like a, I don't know that it, like a self, I don't know that I was self-sabotaging, I'm sure, but evidently people could see, close people around me could see that I would get so far and I would just freeze. Like I would, I would be making it to the top, like let's say it was a corporation or something, not that I worked in that sector, but if you tie it to like a corporate job, I would get all the way to just before the top and then I would be done. And one person actually said, "We see it, you see it, but we can't make her see it." And it was like the potential I had, I couldn't see, but others were seeing some potential that I just was mysterious to me. And and it goes back, like I always thought I was never good enough. I'd never been good enough. Like I was always, nobody liked me. Like all those thoughts were what I had. And so what other people saw, I didn't see. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, no, it does actually, because sometimes we don't know why we are feeling different. We just know that we are.
Yes. I knew there was something wrong with me and
Yeah,
nobody like it. Like there was just something not right. But
yeah.
and other people didn't necessarily see it, but I knew it. I knew it.
Yes, yes, that's it's really powerful, and it's interesting also for a lot of us when we recover memories. I find it interesting that we're usually in our 30s.
Yeah.
So, yes, it just seems to be a time, and I'm sure our audience out there have varying stages in life when their memories came through as well. But I have heard said that when we are ready to face, they
Mhm.
appear. So it takes a phenomenal amount of courage and self-love and self-understanding, as you described, to get to the other side.
It does. And that the other thing I've noticed in sharing survivors and different stories with the recovered memories, there was an incident with my 5-year-old daughter just prior to me remembering. And a lot of people talk about when their children became the age that they were when they were abused. And so I remember looking into a picture I had taken of my daughter, and I was sitting at my friend's house, and I looked right into the eyes of that little girl, and I just busted out crying, and I didn't even know why. It was weird, like, but it was like it was so, and I think that was a key thing to unlocking that for me, and I'll never forget that moment.
Oh my goodness. And
Mhm,
the trauma for you of
mhm,
recognizing something had happened to your beautiful daughter
mhm.
at 5.
Yes.
Were you was she 5 when you understood what was happening, or was it
No,
years
so
later?
it was probably about another year after that,
Yeah,
I think. I think it would have been another year after that. Um, and I still didn't and it took more years to really understand what happened to my children. So after the doors opened and one of my children made a comment, and they didn't give me all the information. As I now know, children of sexual abuse do not give all the information all at once. It kind of trails out. I mean, stuff still trails out today,
yeah,
from all the trauma, but I had to learn that not only was I a child sexual abuse survivor, I had multiple children who were. And that
mm,
was a blow. That one took me to my knees beyond.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
so that was a very difficult journey of being a mother and knowing that this was going to affect them in their adult life because I had just experienced how it was how it had affected me. So to learn that I had multiple children that were being abused,
Gosh, Denise, that would have been such a painful, hard time for you. And gosh, I feel for you. Such love and empathy coming your way.
Well,
And
thank you.
yeah, we do have. This is something that can happen. It can carry on down through the generations with the best will in the world. And I guess this is something that some of our audience will be facing into or recognising as they traverse their recovery and their healing as well. How were you able to manage that once you understood who the perpetrator was and yeah.
For my children?
Mm.
Well, the bad part was I figured out who it was about 30 days too late. And that created a whole nother avenue
Right.
of just problems and struggles and in the court. And so the only thing I knew at first was that there was inappropriate sexual behavior going on between my children, or between some of my children.
Yeah.
And I never thought, and then 30 days later, I remember sitting in my bed and my eyes opened and I realized, oh my gosh, this person's involved. But I didn't know. And I think that's the hard part. Like, I didn't know what exactly happened. I didn't know when it happened. I didn't know where it happened. All I knew without a shadow of a doubt is who it was and how, that it was connected.
Wow.
So, but
Wow.
like you talk about that, and I'll be honest, it was probably the worst years of my life for several
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Like, the circles that I was turned around in, I mean, I couldn't make it through 2 or 3 words of my story without sobbing. I would have to try to talk to authorities or officials. I was being blamed. I was being, it was my fault. I was being spun between 3 different agencies, between my attorney, between what we call child protective services or social services, and the detective. And it was I just felt like I was being turned around in circles, and everyone telling me it was somebody else's job to deal with it. And at the same time, I was the only I had to provide an income. I had to keep a roof over my kids' head. My kids needed to be in school, or I was being threatened with truancy. I had kids exhibiting sexualized behaviors I'd never seen. I had children that I didn't even know who they were,
Yeah.
because all these behaviors just came out of nowhere. It was I can't even I don't even know how I got through. Um, but
Yeah.
it did. It was, and I tell people it was like trauma times 5, and
Yeah.
it was like walking through a minefield, and it was lonely, and it was scary.
Yeah.
It was all kinds, and it wasn't just scary for me, it was scary for them.
Yeah. Well, and scary for them, and I suppose because they were safe enough to start sharing more and releasing more, they would have felt a natural anger, and you would have had to try to manage all of that. And you're the safe person, and as mums out there, sometimes that can happen. We are the ones that will wear
Mhm.
because we are the safe persons that can hold it and contain it. What a challenging, hard time. And also, Denise, full credit to you, because to be able to manage it and have your children feel safe enough to share it is mammoth. Actually, some children can't share.
Well, thank you for saying that. I guess, you saying that this time, I think I finally am heard it. I have had that said to me a lot for years about the safety. I credited that, like, I was just so grateful for anyone who provided help, like
Yeah.
counselors or whatever, but they're like, it's because you're safe enough.
Yes,
And you saying it this time, I think I'm starting to realize, like, I did do something. I
you
provided
did.
safety. And I
You
I
did.
guess for so long, you know, when you can't get justice for your children, or you can't protect your children, you can't stop it, you can't change it. It was so helpless feeling, you know. just the tears, and I can feel them coming on right now, just the tears
Yeah.
and everything else. So you don't see yourself as what you just said. Oh, they feel safe enough to, no, I screwed up, I failed my children. Those are the things I saw. um so I would never, people would say that, but I never heard it, and I feel like I'm hearing it for the first time when you say it this time, that
Well,
it
you
was
know,
safety, and safety
yeah.
does make a difference. To when people feel safe, they will speak. And that's about, that's the life and the culture that we need to change and we need to create, is those
Yeah.
safe spaces. Because you're right. When they feel safe, whoever it is, they will speak. But when we
And
don't feel that we can trust those most horrible what we think is the most horrible parts of us with someone, when we don't feel safe to share that, then we just keep carrying it by ourselves. And that's not fair.
the you're so right. And we as child sexual abuse survivors know that to be true for ourselves. We may have tried to show in every way possible that something was terribly wrong.
Mhm.
And some people did pick up what we were putting down. People were kind of recognizing and knew, for instance, that there's all this potential, and then she freezes, and why can't she, and why isn't she? So in your own way, and I guess in my own way, I was screaming for help
Mhm.
because I wasn't coping. For your children, though, and I think it's important for mums and dads out there who are watching this or hearing this, we do the best we can with what we know at that
Yes.
time. And it's pretty damn good.
Yes.
And in retrospect, we're always going to look back and think, I wish I had, or
Mhm.
if only, or I shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Mhm.
Always did. Let's just honour where we're at and what we had. And for you, Denise, man, the fact that the children could share at all in the
Mhm.
environment it was happening in, it's a double powerful kudos to you, my
Well,
friend.
thank you. And I think
Yeah.
you're exactly right. Like, I mean, giving those opportunities, and then they share it, and it is. We are all doing the best we can, and that's actually in my book. There's be
No.
thankful for what you don't have.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I haven't had to suffer some addictions.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm grateful. That could have been my walk in life.
Yeah.
And you get to a point of acceptance where you can tell your story without so many tears. Sometimes I can make it through, the whole story, or talking about it without tears, and
Yeah.
somehow happiness comes back into your life. But I mean, there was years that laughter didn't even happen. For the girl who always smiled, laughter didn't even happen. It just trying to survive. But now, laughter happens. And I love, these other survivors and coming together. It's like we laugh together, we cry together, we heal together, we walk together, and it's just so nice. Like whenever, I coming together with you recently,
Yeah.
and it's like to know somebody understands me without even having to tell them anything about
Yeah.
me.
And that's another gold nugget. Goodness me, I hope people are writing notes. That's another gold nugget, people out there. The fact is, we are a tribe in a
Mhm,
way because
mhm,
we have an understanding without needing to say a word. And Denise, I think you coined it and nailed it actually quite profoundly. We are believed because we are.
mhm,
We are CSA survivors. No one knows more than us how hard this is to even find the words, let alone show the pain, let alone
mhm.
try and traverse the trauma and emerge, as you said, through the other side. So we get it. And I think there's much to celebrate in that. And in any learning we can have, no matter how small the step we feel is, or no matter how much more we feel we could have done or can do, I think it's important that we stop and recognize, you know what? I'm doing this. I'm proud of where I'm at.
Yes, and I think that's the biggest thing. And I have a friend in it, Taylor, with Parents Never Give Up, and she's in Canada. So, all these countries bridging together and working together. But, she always talks about putting that oxygen mask first.
Yes.
Just like the airplane. And I'm so glad that one of my children's counselors recognized, and she said, you need to call this lady. And that's my counselor. That's my go-to person still to this day. And thank God she gave me that person. So, to support a friend, I think the whole world needs to become educated and aware, because in order to support a friend, you got to know where to go. And even my friends who had no idea they just didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to go. They didn't, but they did the best they could. And everyone did, and just as much as I did. And so, but I had to take care of myself too. But when you're diving through that minefield and you're exhausted, absolutely burning it beyond, and it was all I could do to hang on for years. It was just hang on and keep trying, but then eventually I got the opportunity to sit down with a counselor, and oh gosh, if I could have had that in the beginning, if I could have had her in the beginning, how much better. But still, it came when it came, and I'm forever grateful. But so I always encourage people to find those counselors, find those certified counselors, work with somebody one-on-one. Group healing and what we do, or peer-to-peer and joining groups where other survivors are, is so therapeutic and so healing. But it's also important, like you gave the trigger warning at the beginning, and I'm so bad not to give trigger warnings. I'm so bad. I've always just but I'm really bad and I applaud you for doing that. And so I think it's important to have both worlds, and it's just and Coco says it, Coco feels so at home when we interview guests. That's where she feels at home. It's like her tribe, like you said, even though they're completely age different, complete age difference. I think that's probably one of the places she's most comfortable.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
And people won't know who Coco is. So
unless
Coco,
I tell them, right?
Yeah. So Coco is Denise's daughter. She's your eldest, is that correct?
She's my oldest daughter. Yes, I have 5 children. Coco is the oldest.
Wow.
And so what happened, she kind of was the one that put me into this whole arena. And I'm old school. I didn't go live and do streamings and all this stuff. So, but when Coco was going through with her counselor, and she was doing trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. So she had an awesome counselor, her and one of her siblings, and she did TFCBT. And we were going down the road one day, and she was only in the 3rd grade, so she was like 8. And she wanted but she had begun to find her voice, and she had begun to tell about the deepest stuff. And this is years after she was away from this person. She started to begin to speak, and or away from him on a regular basis. She still had to be apart, but not as often. But and she wanted everyone to have a Miss Rebecca, which was the name of her counselor. And she just wanted everyone to feel the freedom that she felt when she finally was able to begin to tell her counselor what happened. And Coco's still dealing with stuff. She's 14 now. She still deals with stuff that comes up as it comes up, the sleeping giants, the things that linger behind, the triggers, the trauma, the reminders. So she still deals with stuff just like all of us CSA kids do. But so now we do a thing called Coffee and Cocoa, and sharing other survivors, and basically educating and bringing awareness to the topic of child sexual abuse, and doing what we can to use our pain to further a purpose.
And you reach many countries across the world too. I believe you're in China. Yeah, goodness me. I don't think there's a
Right.
corner of the world you haven't quite reached.
I know, like, it just, we never imagined. We honestly just thought we were doing something small in our community, and immediately, and that just shows what a need there is for it. Immediately, we're on the East Coast of the United States. Immediately we were on the West Coast, and people were hearing, and we didn't even know. And here you are in New Zealand, and I find myself trying to say New Zealand here more often. Ireland,
Say it.
England,
Yeah.
Ireland, England, Costa Rica. Like, I just want to start to travel. Like, now I have friends all over the
Yes.
world. Like,
Yes.
and I have friends all over the world because of child sexual abuse,
Yeah.
because I healed, and because I continue to
Yeah.
heal, and because I want to
Yeah.
heal. So, you know, it's almost like my shame has, or what once was my shame of that 5-year-old little girl, of that neighbor that did that to me and kept me so quiet and feeling so alone and so afraid, that situation has brought me people as far as 17 hours we're apart.
Yes. And not showing off world, but we're 17 hours ahead here. Not that it's a
And you're warmer
competition.
there too. You're warmer there
We
too.
are, we are. But
So
look,
don't tell me what happened yesterday.
okay. Oh yes, I won't. What's it worth? But look, you've raised some really useful things for us out here, and for all of our listeners as well. When you think about it, this is a global phenomenon, actually. Um, we really need huge campaigns globally to talk about our 1 and 3 because they are male and female both.
Mhm.
We have huge amounts who are survivors of this, or they are people who are aware of people who are abusing, or they are the pedophiles and the abusers themselves. So there's quite a large component, really, and I think it's time. It's time for stuff to be called out, which is why I've started to set up this platform and get people like yourself on it. I think it's really important. The interesting thing too is that when you think about CSA survivors, we need to hand the shame back. We need
I love
to, yeah, we need to. How do we do that? We have conversations like this.
I do.
We take the stigma away from it. And there are people who aren't the 1 and 3, Denise, who have a kind of a philosophy or a reaction to whenever this is mentioned as, oh, do we have to talk about it? How depressing. And my response is, I will never stop talking about it, because you know what? It could be your child or grandchildren that we save.
You're exactly right. And, I can't think of a better person to talk about it than Coco, but she said one time, don't feel sorry for me. This, like, me speaking was like scoring the winning touchdown of your favorite football game. Like, that
Wow.
is for me to speak. So please don't try to feel bad for me. Feel happy for me, congratulate me, tell me how proud you are of me, because that, for her to speak, and what most people may not know, the average age for a child sexual abuse survivor to speak is age 52. Can you imagine carrying around somebody else's bad choices all of your life, over half of your life?
Yeah.
And we're the ones with the shame. That's why I love how you have the title, handing the shame back. I mean, and that's what I told my children. It's not our fault that these things are inside of us. It's not their fault, and it wasn't my fault that these feelings and these triggers and these responses are inside of me. That was not my fault, nor was it my children's fault, nor is it any child sexual abuse survivor or any victim of sexual assault or any victim of any crime. It's not our fault, it's in there. But once we become aware it's in there, and I tell my children, it's our responsibility to deal with it, because
Yeah.
I can't go around and just hurt somebody now because I'm reacting. and there's times I don't go out, and I tell people I'm not fit for public consumption. Like I don't need to be in public because I
Yeah,
can't behave properly today because I'm not in a very good mental space
yeah,
for whatever reason. So it's not my fault, and it's not their fault, it's there, but we do have to deal with it. And I'm just so grateful for people like you and just all the many survivors that are out there and doing things to raise this awareness and education, because you guys give me a safe space to take my junk and when I get overwhelmed, and when my reminders hit, and you give me places to go, and to just be able to keep carrying this and to work together. Because I mean, I'm so blessed to be just connected to you and all this other CSA. It's not a shameful thing. And I just love how you say handing that shame back.
yep,
Because I mean, I'm no longer ashamed. I have no, and even as a mother, I'm no longer, for a while I was ashamed. How could I not know? How did this happen under my nose? How, all those questions. It's not my fault. I didn't choose to do those things. There's only one person who chose to sexually abuse my children, and I can call him by name.
yep,
And the authorities know it, and everyone knows it, or the authorities know it, Child Protective Services knows it. And but then you get into it, the justice system and how difficult it is to prosecute these crimes, and and stuff. And that's the hard part. But the reality is we can hand that shame back. There's only one person that made the choice to sexually abuse
yep,
me. There's
yeah,
only one person who made the choice to sexually abuse my children. And you're
yes,
right, it wasn't me, and it's not my shame to
no,
carry.
no.
Sorry, I've never said that that powerful.
I like
I've
that.
never, really said it that way, but that's the truth. But it took a long time. I don't want anyone to think, well, it took me a long time. Yeah, it's been years that I've been dealing with this to get to the point that it's not my fault. I didn't do it.
Hand it back. It
Hand it
never
back.
belonged to you.
No, it didn't. And
And
yeah,
yeah,
go.
society keeps us quiet,
Hmm.
not just of the mother of children who are also CSA survivors, but also for yourself as one. It's designed to keep us quiet, and these pedophiles know what they're doing because it's all done in secrecy and silence. Can't
It
tell
is.
anyone. Then, of course, if there's any hint or sign that something's going on, depending on the functionality of your family, or not in my case, you're imagining it, stop making stuff up, blah, or, deluded, lying, blah, blah, blah. So that's designed to keep us quiet. And it's also not nice to look at, pretty to have, Denise. So it's unpalatable for the greater public. They don't want to
Right.
know.
They don't. And I think it's because they don't know what to do with it. And I
Yeah,
guess if anyone hears me today, if anyone listens today, it's okay that you didn't have to go through what we did,
yeah,
but just celebrate our courageous voice. Just tell us
yes,
good job, and don't be
yeah,
afraid of us. Our
yeah,
stories, if we're able to speak to you about our story, then you can handle it because we are comfortable enough to share it with you.
yeah,
And so don't be afraid of it. Don't
no,
stop, because your fear of this topic is what continues to let pedophiles run loose in our churches, in our politics, in our high up firms, in our coaches, in our school systems. Your fear of my story is what allows these people to keep going.
I
And I'm not
love
afraid of
that.
my story. I'm not afraid of my story. My daughter's not afraid. My kids aren't afraid of their story. They were sexually abused by somebody who chose to do that to them. Somebody who knew better, who had an authority over them, somebody who had no right to do those things.
No,
There's only one person. And so the more you're willing to listen to us, the more we can eradicate this. I mean,
yeah,
everyone's listening to horrible stories that are happening around the world right now. Like
yeah,
our stories aren't that bad.
yeah.
And, but you listening helps us hand the shame back to who it goes to.
Well, that's right. But it also equally gives people out there who are listening permission to hand their own shame back
Yes.
and
Hmm.
share with, even if it's a friend. I don't know if you've heard of Madeline Black in Glasgow. She's
Hmm.
a phenomenal powerhouse as well. She's just done a second TED talk on shame, and she was talking about this very thing as well. And I love what you've said. So love what you've said, Denise. And that is, well, many things actually. I am trying to keep up. No, many things, but one that you just said was, it's actually people feeling uncomfortable that helps this to be perpetuated. You said it a lot better than that, but
well, education and awareness is the key to prevention.
yeah,
And so when you're not willing to listen to that this goes on, you're continuing to make our communities unsafe. So perpetrators will run. That's why I tell my schools and stuff, like, if you talk about this, if you educate this, you have this at your staff meeting, guess who doesn't want to work here?
yeah,
Pedophiles. They don't want to work here.
yes,
They don't want to work amongst people who talk about it. Guess what they're going to do? And I hate to push them to another school, but they're going to go elsewhere. And so that school needs to get educated, and that school needs to talk about it.
yeah,
If we seriously say that we want to protect children, then,
yeah,
and we won't
yeah,
talk about this one.
yeah,
I mean, this is a pandemic across the entire world,
yes,
and it's gone on
yes,
for hundreds and thousands of years.
yeah,
So don't tell me that you're willing to protect children, but you're not willing to have a tough conversation,
no,
and you're not willing to hear these stories, because the stories are real. But it's okay. You don't have to feel sorry for us. You don't have to feel bad for us.
no, be
We
proud. We're
Yeah,
out there, we're speaking.
yes.
We're never gonna stop speaking. It's interesting, Denise. In New Zealand at the moment, we've got quite a few institutionalized historical exposés on what's happened to children in care, or children being taught by John of God brothers and Catholic priests and brothers and female caregivers, etc. It's a school called Dilworth College where there were not one but 11 pedophiles. I call that a pedophile ring. And of course the cover-ups, and even today people are trying to cover it up or shift the blame. Whereas really, wouldn't it be something for someone leading this to say, you know what, we got it so wrong. Let survivors speak. Let's hear these stories. Let's make some changes. Let's actually acknowledge that this is a huge, I call it the silent endemic in New Zealand, and get some changes made, because
Absolutely.
this is just going to continue. But anyway, I digress. I want to come back to you.com. So you've talked about coffee and
Coffee and
cocoa.
Cocoa. You can find it on Facebook. You can search it at Voices of Coffee and Cocoa, and that's myself and my 14-year-old daughter. And we have different
Amazing.
guests sharing stories, and we try to cover tough topics. And Coco usually points out my gray hair or something. So, but we do it in I don't know.
A
People
fun
say that they
way.
just love to watch it because it's just,
Yes.
I don't know why, but they do.
It's beautiful. It's so natural and happy and relaxed, even though it shouldn't be a happy topic. It is, because as you say, we're celebrating where we're at. We're celebrating our voices.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing that maybe people that have a hard time listening don't understand, and maybe we can say that, like, we're celebrating where we're at every day. There was a time in our lives that we lived in what's called survival mode,
Yeah.
and that is not living.
No.
And so if I can talk about tough subjects every day because I'm living. So this is truly living, and it's not a way of life that I used to have or my children had. So, you know, it's not hard for us. I guess that's why I can go into a survivor meeting and we can laugh and cry all in the same 10 minutes, and it's okay. And
Yeah.
we're good with it, and we
Yeah.
understand and stuff. And we're more alike. So, but we have coffee and cocoa, and then I have the TWC Clubhouse, which just launched.
So tell us about that. What happens in that space, and where did the
Well,
idea come? And
yeah, so well, coffee and cocoa, it doesn't provide income, and I work all day long on, what we do. We do it for the
yes,
passion in our heart,
yeah,
but we also
yeah,
have to feed our children. So
yes,
the TWC Clubhouse came about, and but the bigger reason was when we started doing coffee and cocoa, I learned that there were so many pods of people all around that we're trying to make a difference and that we're trying to do something. And I'm a big cheerleader, always have been. I'll cheer for a dying cow, but there's and there is the truth there. But
Oh,
I that's a real story. But so bringing people together, right? And doing the next right thing. So my dream and my vision is that together we can change this narrative. And so that's what TWC stands for, is Together We Can. The TWC Clubhouse goes back to no, really. The TWC Clubhouse goes back to bringing everyone together to sorry, I got interrupted for a second. I lost my train of thought. But it brings everyone together in one place. We have different facilitators. And I will tell you, if I'm not sure how soon this will go out, but twcclubhouse.com. And it is changing right now to bring the other facilitators on. But it's going to be, my end goal is that every hour on the hour, 7 days a week, CSA survivors and trauma survivors will have a place to plug into. Because sometimes our trauma hits at 2 a.m. New Zealand time, and sometimes it hits at 2 a.m. US time. And that makes a difference, and having somewhere to go. So, and I just love it. It's one simple membership fee of $47. I think that's just US dollars. And so we are so excited. I was just meeting with someone today. And so, but that's the end goal, is to have every hour on the hour, different facilitators, different groups, different topics of healing, because together we can end this, and together we can heal. But that's what I always say. Together we walk, together we stand, and together we can. But together we heal. And it doesn't replace your one-to-one counselor. I still have mine, but it does give people a place that they know they're not alone, and it gives you a place where you can feel connected and just have that support. And I'm just so passionate about it. I'm so excited. So within the next couple months, it'll be really taking off, and I'm just
it's so special, and
it
it's so
is.
well set up. I'm really impressed, actually.
I'm so
um,
excited. And there's different authors in there. There's different
yes.
things. So it's great. I love it. Every community
Um,
that I take part in, I take part in every community that happens in there right now. In every single one, even all the years of counseling I've done, every single one I absolutely learn from.
yes, yes. And that's the gift of this. And, I don't think we're ever going to stop learning. And that would be a sad day if we did, learning, or even having something reinforced that we've felt strongly about. So,
Yeah.
look, I want to take you back in time. I'm just trying to get a little more of a handle on the 5, 6, 7-year-old Denise. When all this was going on for you, what were your parents away, or were they were they aware you didn't want to feel comfortable going? It's in those days, children kind of just did what we were told, didn't they?
To
So
be honest, I blank out through most of my childhood, and I always thought it was weird that I really didn't have any memories of my
yeah,
childhood.
yeah,
But and nothing against my parents. I love them
no,
both for who they are. My dad passed away 10 years ago, but at that time, we were in a neighborhood and it was considered a safe small town. The neighbor across the street was 7 years older than me, which I thought when it came back, I thought, oh, it was just curious. I've learned that age difference, it's not just curious. And unfortunately, he works with children today, which is scary. Um, I know. Yeah, that's really. And I've actually gone to the police to report it, to put him on the radar. And our systems don't have ways to do that.
wow,
I know I had a big long talk with some detectives and everything else. And they're like, I admire your courage for coming forward, but no, we can't even call across the street to the other police department. There's no way to red flag people. There's no way, and I didn't want to make a scene. Maybe he doesn't hurt children today. All I wanted to know is, if there's children out there that have reported this, you got this woman right
yeah,
here who can
good,
stand and tell you the truth, who
yeah,
has a stronger
yeah,
voice today.
yes, yes,
There's no way for us to do that for children, as that's not horrible. So you look at these pedophiles, and like you said, pedophile rings, they've been in existence for 20 years. These guys have victim lists that are so long. This is the reason why, because we don't do what we say, which is protect children. But for my parents, my dad was an alcoholic at the time. He quit drinking when I was 6th grade. He worked 3rd shift. He slept during the day. My mom, as long as she kept the house quiet and didn't wake him up, I guess that was the saving grace. And my mom's still alive and I love her dearly, but the 2 words that I use to describe her is emotionally unavailable.
Yeah.
And so, I understand why. I mean, I understand who my mom is and I love her greatly, but
Yeah.
due to her own upbringing and childhood and things, that was who she was when she started having
Yeah.
kids. Just
Yeah.
like my children suffered because I didn't have the proper boundaries to be in relation, things I didn't know. So, but yeah, so my
Oh, yeah.
parents were
No.
there, but I
Yeah.
think they just kind of trusted my brother and I
Yeah.
to go over there, and they just didn't. They just didn't think that something like that would happen.
Yeah. And that's often the case. And you've got people, of course, we don't want to think it happens.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we know it happens more than we think we know it
Hmm.
happens. But the reality is we don't want to live in fear. And I guess that fine line there for you um, is really they did the best they could with what they had, and we're
Hmm.
not seeking to blame, but it's
Hmm.
interesting, or not but, and it's interesting that at the same time, um, what we have is parents who are supposedly protecting us as people who are potentially overwhelmed themselves in their own ways with their own
Yep.
struggles, and it makes it really challenging, doesn't it, for children to maybe find the words, or not even the
Hmm.
language, but the behaviour. If you've got someone who's emotionally unavailable, and my mother was, and I can't be as generous about mine as you can be, but that's okay. Well, that's for another day.
Well,
Um,
and they're all different. Every
yeah,
situation of us CSA survivors is totally different. That's why we don't have to
yes,
compare stories.
yeah, that's right. We
So,
just have commonalities, don't we?
yes.
But it's interesting how these kind of pedophiles, whether they're 7 years older or 27 years older, just know that we will never speak. And
Yep.
I guess it brings me back to the education and awareness piece. How would you like to see that um, worked with in terms of schools or groups?
I think that, all church programs, I think if you're any organization, every church, every year, every week, there are some phenomenal people out there, and the TWC Clubhouse will be bringing some of that as well. But, people need to understand grooming. They need to understand these behaviors. They need to understand, and not only that, they need to talk about it. You need to talk about these conversations every week at your staff. I was a former public school teacher, and it, we didn't talk about it. You knew it went on. I was a mandated reporter. The first time I got trained, a mandated reporter in the US means that, I had a job profession that required me by law to report. Do you want to know when I got training on what a mandated reporter was? After I had been in the public schools over 10 years. First time. So please don't tell me that we make this stuff important. We don't.
No,
We don't. And
no,
I love my public school teachers. I love my public school teachers. I'm not trying to throw off on that. We have
no,
problems in our and my bachelor's degree is in criminal justice and my master's degree in education. So I've worked in the prisons, I've worked probation, I've worked parole, I've worked the public schools. And the sad part is our systems are broken. And I'm sure New Zealand's no different. Our
no,
systems are broken. And the first step is to admit it. Admit that they're broken. We all know it. Let's just accept and admit it. And then when we admit, then we can begin to move forward. I had to come to accepting and admitting that my children were sexually abused and that I did the best I could.
yeah,
And when I finally it took years, but when I finally got to the point of accepting it, that it was what happened, then I could move forward from it. But as long as I was not accepting it, there was still parts of me that were in denial or shame or blame or whatever else. When I accepted that my life choices put me in this situation, put my children, my lack of all these things, that man did what he did. And so when we as countries, and when we as communities, and when we as societies, organizations, when we seriously mean that we will protect children, that means that we're willing to have these conversations.
Yeah,
It's as easy as that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I've
And
always said that about the US, though. Supposedly we had a war on drugs. The United States back in the 80s, if we had a war on drugs, there wouldn't be drugs in the United States. We don't have a war on drugs.
no. And you're so right. And I think there's just so much that needs changing. And we've got lots of fabulous men and women here in Aotearoa who are working endlessly, tirelessly, trying to get some criminal justice system laws and regulations changed. It's
And, you know,
interesting.
that one right there is a big one. And there's one major change that across the board would be so easy. Remember a little bit ago, I said the average person does not speak until the age of 52. So
Yeah.
how can you have a statute of limitations when the child can't even speak until they're 52?
Yes. It's
So
a
right there, across the board, there needs to be no statute of limitations
yeah,
on crimes against children,
yeah,
and especially sexual abuse crimes
yeah,
against children,
yeah.
because it takes us. My daughter, my children are rare. And I don't say that, I mean, I think they're fabulous, of course. But why I say that they're rare and they're unique is because most children do not speak. And
Most children
that's
don't.
the sad part.
Yeah.
It takes us till we're 52, but yet we have a statute of limitations. And if you as a survivor finally remember, your memories come back, your brain's finally willing to let you go there and deal with this stuff that you've never been ready to deal with, we disassociate. Like the amount of things that happen to us as survivors of child sexual abuse, you do not understand until you've been through it. And that's why
Yeah.
we understand each other so
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But that's one easy fix for the criminal justice system. And I think the
It's
other easy fix is I'm not asking for private information on that individual who did that to me, right? I can go find it easier than they.
yeah.
All I tried to do was say, hey, there should be a way that if we can track all that we do, there should be a way for me to go into any police station anywhere in the world, in this country, in the world, in the country, because pedophiles move. I should be able to go in, report somebody's name, right? And everywhere they can pull up their driving record and tell me
Yeah.
if they were speeding. But and I'm not asking for detailed information. All I'm saying is that police officer that takes my report should be able to see a red flag that says, hey, they got a report about him in Nevada. And then they have to pick up the phone and call. I'm not asking for the details of the police report. I'm not asking to violate somebody's privacy. I'm just saying that we know that these people move around. We know that they go to different places when they're on the up and up. So let's do it.
And that makes perfect sense, actually. I know up until recently, and I'm not sure how far through we are with this particular aspect of the legal justice system when it comes to pedophiles being or abusers being brought to court. But their past criminal history is not allowed to be brought into
Brought in.
evidence. But guess
Mhm.
what? The child or the
Victims are.
teenager, the victims, it's all figure. And I think, really, how many cases do we see come before the courts where this man or woman gets off
Mhm.
with nothing or a 1 or 2 year suspended sentence?
Mhm.
And then you find out in the news the following days, but they were also charged 3 years earlier on the same crimes with another range of
Mhm.
children. So something's
People wonder
off.
why, yeah, people wonder why these men's, and it's not just men. Let's
No,
understand that too.
yeah,
Unfortunately, women abuse
yeah,
children, and
yes,
mothers abuse their daughters, and
yes,
fathers abuse their sons
yeah,
or their daughters,
yeah,
or
yeah,
so this happens and it's real.
yeah,
And then you get into, satanic and spiritual, and there's things
yes,
within those families and stuff. So there's all kinds of things to incest. Mine wasn't a story of incest, but I do have incest in what I talk about today.
yeah.
And that's a whole dynamic. So no, the the reason these people are 60 years old when they finally get charged is because that's when there was finally enough. but that doesn't mean that there hasn't been 30, 60 victims prior to that that have reported.
Yes.
Well, and here's a prime example, an easy example that's made world news. I'm sure you guys heard about it in New Zealand. Our U.S. gymnastics team, they reported over 5 years ago, and it didn't go. And luckily, they had a platform that allowed them to go in front of the Congress and the Senate to plead for. But that's the thing. If they would have listened, and if they would have filed, and if they would have done things, several of those girls that ended up speaking would have never been abused.
That's right. We
And
saw that. Yeah.
we've got a story of that at the University of Michigan here, of a doctor who's dead now, but had decades and decades of victims.
Wow.
So when we're allowing this to go on, and we are, by not talking about it, we're silent.
So if I gave you a magic wand and said, here you go, Denise from Michigan, I'm going to grant you the power to do three things.
Gosh.
What would that look like? What would those three things be to help our fellow CSA survivors in any way, shape or form? What would that look like?
Well, I definitely think it would be to, the pedophiles, one and done.
Yeah.
Like, one and done. I'm done playing a pedophile game.
Yeah.
And that just brings me to tears to think that, after all these years, we don't want it to end. It's just like the war on drugs. There isn't one. There isn't.
No.
Because if it meant that much to us, we would not have the laws in place that we do that protect perpetrators more than they protect victims. You would not have people look at me as a mother and say, at least you got 3 out. You would not have district attorneys sit across from me and say the things they've said and admitting that they know, but they can't, charge, and the possible future victims. So number one would be, it's a one and done. Like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this topic. It should not plague our society. We are too good for this.
Yes.
So obviously number one is, but number two is to educate and bring awareness. And I guess that probably has to come as number one, because I believe the only way to getting all pedophiles and to make a dent in this is that every person in our world has to be willing to be educated. They have to be willing to have these tough topics. They have to show up to have them. And so I think that's probably the biggest one, is that everyone is willing, because that's the only way, is that together we can do this, but we have to be willing. And that's what I ask people. And I don't care if and the thing is you may not know that you know somebody, but the numbers, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, somebody. You just don't know that you know somebody.
Yes.
I mean, and this is
I
what
like
I tell
that.
people.
Yeah.
This is what I tell people as a former public school teacher. Stand outside. I don't know about in New Zealand, but here in the US, you're going to have 25 to 30 kids sitting in a classroom. Stand outside one classroom door. How many victims do you have in one school classroom? How many? When you start talking 1 in 3 and 1 in 4, how many are sitting in that room silent? Now, I encourage you, start to step down your child's hallway and start counting the classrooms, and turn the hallway and start counting all the classrooms down that hallway.
Yeah.
And now when you get out to the front of that building, tell me how many victims you have in just that one building.
Yeah.
The numbers don't lie.
No, the numbers don't lie.
The only people that lie are the perpetrators.
Yeah. And there's a reason for that. And the people who find this uncomfortable to discuss or look at actually enable them. They don't enable the survivors, they enable the perpetrators. It keeps the whole cycle going. But look, I really appreciate that. Just as we're heading towards a close.
And number 3, I encourage every survivor to find their voice.
Yes, I love it. Is there anything, just as we're heading towards closing out, is there anything you personally have done for yourself that you would say, hey, fellow survivors, try this? So some people talk about journaling, some people talk about having a group, some people talk about a therapist. Anything in particular that we maybe haven't looked at today that you would say, hey?
I think just for me, it happened with coffee and cocoa. And what happened was Coco and I did not realize the level of healing that we would receive by connecting with other survivors.
Yes.
We didn't, I mean, and that's why I tell people coffee and cocoa was another level of healing that we never expected to get.
Yes.
So, I mean, so I think getting plugged in those safe places and those relationships, they're just the cornerstone to my life now. They are family names. Like they are,
Yes.
even though they're countries apart and everything else, they're the people that have become, we have what's called family of choice, my kids and I. We don't have the same Thanksgiving, the same Christmas,
Oh,
because we lost a lot of family along the way.
yeah. Yes.
The biological, don't
Yes.
get us wrong,
Yes.
we're very happy to let go.
Yeah.
But so we have what's called FOC Christmas and FOC
Mm,
Thanksgiving, and that's our family of choice. And
that's
we don't necessarily
amazing.
spend it the same way all the time.
No. And
So,
that's beautiful.
so I
That's
think get plugged
beautiful.
in, but take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And please, mother to mother, parent to parent, caregiver to caregiver, whatever it is, if you're dealing with the youth that's going through it, get yourself help too.
Yeah.
I say that if it wouldn't have been for my counselor, I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have
No.
made it. It was a lot. So get plugged in yourself, and that's important.
Yeah.
Very important.
No, I love that. Get plugged in yourself. Love it.
Yeah.
Hey,
And so get over there to the TWC Clubhouse.com and we'll plug you in.
Yay!
I'm so excited about those communities.
It's amazing.
I am.
Hey, thank you, Denise, for your
You're so
fabulous
welcome.
insight and
Thank
wisdom
you.
today and for sharing with us. If you don't mind hanging on for a moment, I'm just going to close out with our fabulous audience. Audience, wow, what haven't we got from this fabulous woman today? And look at the amazing work she's doing over in Michigan and the States to help survivors, which is reaching us here in little old New Zealand. So as we're coming to a close, I just wanted to remind you that if you are looking for uplifting content or resource, go to gloriamasters.com and you'll see a whole list of blogs there on a whole lot of topics that may just answer a question you may have. As well as that, I'm always looking for guests on the show. Unfortunately, I seem to be quite light on male guests, which is sad for our men out there because, we know there's a lot of you as well, and this is a safe place. So please go to gloriamasters.com, fill out the online form, and it would be my pleasure to have a conversation with you. In the meantime, and until next week, look after your fabulous selves and hang in there together. You're never alone.